Something that I've done is make this a lot wordier than it normally would be. I normally endeavor to be very Steve Jobsian about my presentations. This has stuff written all over it, because if I do disappear, hopefully be able to just see what's on the screen and be like, oh, that's what he meant. That's what he was saying. So yeah, let's try this out. Welcome to my talk I'm calling Useful Lies versus Confusing Truths, or How to Communicate with Non-Technical Stakeholders. Real quick, first up, who am I? Well, I'm Tom Hunt, the head of data and analytics at Koala. We used to be just Koala Mattress because we sold mattresses. Now we're Koala Furniture because we sell a whole bunch of stuff. But effectively, we're a direct-to-consumer online furniture brand. So it has been, from day dot, incredibly important for us to do an awful lot of marketing and have a very clear understanding of who our customers were and how well we were reaching them, and then also make really kick-ass sort of sustainable furniture. I started there about 3 years ago when it was 20 people in the building slanging mattresses, and now we're over 100 people across 2 countries. So it's been a pretty wild ride. My background personally is in marketing and software development, which makes me a really weird guy. And then also I'm quite passionate about arguing about reality and building brands, right? That's what I sort of see the role of an analyst to be. You have to understand what is true in some sort of interesting sense, and then you have to go and explain that to marketers and people who are interested in buying ads and making things happen in the real world. So I'm going to be talking to you today about 4 things. The first one is why talking to people about analytics is hard. 2, what I actually mean by a useful lie. 3, how to lie usefully. And then 4, some caveats and other considerations, which is kind of my miscellaneous grab bag that allows me to stop writing titles. But so this talk is going to start fairly philosophical and draw on my experiences over the past few years of building the data-driven culture at Koala, and then hopefully get more sort of practical as we move on. I see this as a fairly hardline approach to comms across an organization, because the things that I'm going to say are like pretty simple in actual fact, but it is the process of making them work in an organization of human beings, which is the thing that requires discipline and a strong personality, honestly. I'm going to make the argument that the solution to failures in analytics communications is to pull away from the complex reality and instead to use increasingly simplistic lies. And I'm making scare quotes with my fingers when I say that, but I don't think I have my camera on, so you might not be able to see it, but quote unquote lies. To be clear, I don't actually advocate misleading people. However, I do consider an analyst's job to be attempting to understand the truth in all of its sublime complexity. And that's a really bad place to start from when you're trying to communicate something to a non-technical end user or stakeholder. So I think you need to get away from that, which is why I use the word lie. So what I am not going to be talking about is how to avoid jargon or read body language or reporting structures and cadence. You can Google those things, and I suggest you do, but those are tactical problems to what is normally a tactical solutions rather, to what is normally a philosophical problem. So first up, context. Why is it so hard to talk to non-technical people about data? Well, like we as analysts and as data scientists and as analytics engineers, we understand how complex our jobs are, right? If you're technically focused, you understand how increasingly difficult it is to track somebody's identity through using a cookie in a browser, right? And like what ITP means for all of that. If you're marketing focused, you understand that some advertising might have a different payback period than other advertising. You understand the impact of brand as opposed to just performance marketing. If you're stats focused, you know how important it is to consider the interpretability of the outputs of your models and how probabilistic most outputs actually are, and what that means. Nothing is simple. These are the sophisticated considerations that we are paid to understand, right? And we understand what is critical to move the needle in our areas of expertise. We build our entire careers around this. On the flip side, Non-technical stakeholders balk at the idea of being asked to consider complicated answers. Like, not all of them, but in my experience, the vast majority of people whose job is not to be constantly thinking about all of these weird little edge cases will either smile and nod when you say these things to them, or just like outright not listen to you and not hear you. Unfortunately, it is hardwired into us as human beings to look for simplifying heuristics, to look for patterns, to look for an easy answer. When we're talking about something that doesn't have an easy answer, that's problematic. It used to always annoy me because the considerations that I was trying to convey as an analyst were extremely important. Otherwise, the person I was talking to was going to apply the information or the insight that I was trying to provide in the wrong way. I'm sure that this is a common problem that you guys have faced. There's something really interesting that you want them to understand that will help with their job, but if they don't know about the edge cases, they're going to screw it up when they try and do something with it. So what this sort of dynamic leads to is people not understanding what you're saying and therefore perhaps not acting at all, which is actually usually the best case. Not understanding and therefore thinking that you don't actually have an answer to the problem, which is slightly worse because it's your job to have an answer. Or even worse, misunderstanding and then getting it wrong and making a bad decision, which is extremely common. Or even worse, accidentally making the right decision for the wrong reason and then ending up believing that everything you were saying about how complicated this was is actually not true, and you lose credibility, and it becomes much harder to get anyone to listen to you about interesting caveats or insights moving forward. So the key problem that it has taken me personally years to appreciate properly is that in reality, these people, these non-technical stakeholders, people outside of analytics and data, they're good at their jobs. They don't have time to be good at your job too, right? So on its face, this is a really, really obvious thing to say, but it actually speaks to a much more subtle truth, right? Like, people just need inputs for their decisions. People just have, they have a goal and they just need to know information which is going to help them towards that goal, right? So as an analyst, the secret is not to attempt to get better at explaining everything or to get better at explaining things in general, but the secret is to lead only with the information that allows the stakeholder that you're talking to make the best decision, even if that information isn't actually the best representation of reality, right? If what a non-technical stakeholder comes away with is an understanding of the levers that they have available to them that allows them to do something that is beneficial to them, that's more important than them understanding all of the caveats that at the end of the day, it's actually your job to understand. And that's what I'm sort of going to talk through for most of this talk. So to summarize broadly, why is it hard? Our jobs are extremely complicated. Understanding any analytics output requires contextual information that non-technical stakeholders don't have. Non-technical stakeholders don't even have the bandwidth normally to engage in the full breadth of interesting caveats and subtleties of data that we do. And we should be working to abstract the complex reality into information that speaks in terms of the levers available to them. And this is what I mean by a useful lie. I'm going to check chat real quick because I see it popping up a lot. Cool. Okay. Doesn't see. Yeah. Cool. So, and as a note, I want to do 2 sections of questions on this real quick. I want to do one sort of towards the middle and then one at the end, just to clarify. I guess, Mo, if people post some stuff in, we can go through real quick. Sweet. Thanks. Cool. So what is a useful lie in this context? This might, to some of you, still sound a little bit insane, why you would tell somebody something that is less representative of reality just to attempt to be more useful. So I want to go through like a worked example, which I find like particularly interesting. Bear with me. Let's say that it is the 1600s and we need a system which predicts where a star will be in the night sky so we know where to point a telescope, right? contrived, but bear with me, this is actually quite cool. So in the 1600s, before the Copernican revolution, basically, there was a model of the solar system where planets moved in these bizarre sort of spirals, right? I'm just going to mute this because it's not necessary to have the sound, even though the sound is neat. Anyway. So planets moved in these sort of bizarre spirals around the Earth. The reason that this model came up with is because as you observe a planet traversing across the sky, you actually see it wiggle backwards and forwards. And so if you strictly observe what we're able to see on Earth, what you see is a planet or a star sort of jiggle. If you try and extrapolate that out to where these things might be moving in space, you end up with this utterly bizarre model of the solar system. So moving forward, we know that in reality, we orbit around the sun, and then everything is orbiting in basically circles, and that this is more reflective of reality. And Copernicus came up with this idea of a geocentric solar system. A heliocentric solar system, a sun, everything orbiting around the sun. Everyone in this chat knows that that's more correct. That's more reflective of reality. But in the 1600s, that model was actually worse at predicting where a star would be in the night sky. Why is that? It's because, well, they're not actually circles. Planets orbit in ovals, in elliptical orbits, right? So it's mostly correct, but it's got some imperfections to it. And then on the other hand, you have this system which is like completely nonsense in an objective sense, but was actually really good at allowing you to predict where a star would be in the night sky, right? This should sound pretty familiar to anybody who has to deal with especially marketing or economic models of the world. We have these models that are we know pretty close to nonsense in reality, but they capture enough of the dynamics of the system that they're really, really effective at allowing us to know what is going to happen next, or to give us a directional impact of where to go next. So with that sort of update, you guys are now all bleeding edge sort of astronomers from a 1600s sense. If somebody came to us and said, hey, we need to build a model that lets us know where a star is going to be in the night sky, we could either say to them, well, okay, Copernicus has come up with this heliocentric model, and Newton, our best understanding of gravity at the moment, says that this model is probably correct. This other model, which we've used historically, has some serious sort of flaws in it, but its outputs are quite good. If your stakeholder was attempting to perhaps travel outside of the planet Earth, then giving them the squiggly lines would be disastrous. But insofar as all they want to do is find where something would be in the night sky, even though it's less accurate, it's much, much, much more simple, because you just have one graph and that graph works really well. There are no edge cases. Whereas with this weird circular model, there's all these sort of small problems you have to take into account. So let's now bring it way back down to something really concrete, right? Let's talk about a business analytics example. If a non-technical stakeholder came up to you and said, hey, has a key metric, something that we track, increased recently in light of changes to the economic landscape? And so let's say that there's some key metric being measured across the business. It normally ranges between an 8 and a 12, averaging at about 10, and currently it sits at 12, right? Senior leadership wants to know if this number has increased, because if it has, potentially drastic measures need to be taken to react to it across the business. Sorry, just missing this. So it is a big deal if this particular metric has gone up. We might have to do some really drastic stuff. And we know that it's slightly elevated. Well, like we could say all this. We could say that there does appear to have been a slight uptick, but this is definitely within historical bounds. As such, even if there has been an increase due to the recent like events and changes in the economy, this is likely to be within a range that the business can bear. Like we could test to determine how unlikely this current number is, and understand if it's likely to be chance or related to what's happening, or we could even train up a forecast up until say last week to determine some sort of counterfactual. But like honestly, none of this is going to be significant or reliable, and we really need to wait a couple of weeks. Like that would be the messy truth, right? Like yes, it has gone up, but there are caveats. The useful lie in this instance is this metric has not increased. Check again next week, right? This is an answer that speaks only to what they are attempting to achieve. Should we take drastic action to change the business? No, this metric has not increased. We will check again, right? Let's talk about a marketing example now. So if a non-technical stakeholder said, oh, what does our attribution algorithm say about ad performance? Let's say that you have some fabulously mathematical multi-touch algorithm on top of some sort of state-of-the-art user tracking infrastructure that outputs an exact dollar figure for ROI calculations on advertising, right? Like it can tell you to the dollar how much each ad made. A non-technical stakeholder reading this is going to see like a really high number next to a certain ad and say, oh, this is fantastic. You can say to them, oops, hang on. You can say to them, okay, well, the algorithm provides these outputs. However, you have to consider the potential that we lose tracking in our top of funnel advertising, or you have to consider the lack of representation of our branding campaigns that aren't being captured necessarily. You have to consider the over-indexing of very low funnel remarketing campaigns. You have to consider that one time in June when we were double counting email conversions. You have to consider the fact that high performance does not in fact tell us if there's more capacity to invest in this channel. Again, there are a million caveats, and these are all true. These are all useful and important, but at the end of the day, you have to speak in terms of the levers that stakeholder has available to them. So if that stakeholder is seeking to make like a media mix decision or redistribute capital, then it's just, look, Instagram made you $10 for every $1 you put into it, right? Like it is simply the case that you made more money than you expected here, and here. So a useful lie is just an abstraction that allows the stakeholder to not think about the context that you happen to be an expert in. And to a large extent, it's our responsibility as data and analytics experts to think up and maintain these abstractions. We need to find a way to not deceive our users, but to protect them from all of the bullshit that we have to deal with every day, so that they're able to go out, understand what you say, and apply it in a way that they have control, or apply it to a part of the business that they have control over. And like, this is a second important insight about this. Crucial detail is always lost anyway. So using the previous example there of some fabulously mathematical attribution algorithm, let's say an analyst comes up with a bunch of numbers about different ad campaigns and how effective they've been. They're going to go talk to some sort of stakeholder, a manager, or even somebody in the ad team, who is then going to turn around and talk to somebody else and say to them, hey, we need to buy more Instagram, right? All of those subtleties, all of those things that you may attempt to communicate are going to be lost in that second conversation anyway. So what's important is actually not the conversation that you have with the stakeholder, but in influencing the conversation that they have with the second person they speak to, or the ad buyer. So, sorry, I haven't been talking to anybody for weeks, so this is, I think, more talking than I've done in ages. So you want to be influencing the conversations that they subsequently have and focusing less on the conversation you have with them. So, in summary, what is a useful lie? It is an abstraction of all the complexity and caveats that allow the stakeholder to move in the right direction. It is not the best representation of reality in some sort of objective sense, but it is a representation which speaks to the levers that a stakeholder has available to them. And it's focused entirely upon influencing what they do instead of in some sort of objective sense, attempting to get them to understand the situation perfectly. So far, some of you may be thinking like, well, duh, why would you bombard an end user with technical detail? But I consider this approach to be something that you would apply iteratively. Whenever you see a failure to either supply or act upon available data, what you're normally seeing is a bandwidth issue. You're seeing a failure in communication, which is being driven by the fact that people simply don't have the time or the capacity to convey what they feel is necessary, right? This may mean that you need to just, or this means that you need to take what you were trying to convey and just bring it down one layer of simplification. If there is still a failure to communicate or act upon this information, bring it down and add another layer of simplification until your insights fit within the available bandwidth. And this may mean that some extremely interesting and subtle insights and factors become extremely broad and directional advice, but there are sort of two responses to that. The first one is that in every instance, as somebody in data and analytics, it is better to provide something simple that is used than to provide something exquisite that is not. And secondly, if your stakeholders aren't engaging in your exquisite and subtle analysis, you probably shouldn't be doing exquisite and subtle analysis. You should be working on walking before you can run. So far, this is why it's hard. And here is what I think the shape of the solution is. I want to stop here real quick, just before we go on to like how we approach this, and answer some or ask some questions. Mo, can you jump in? Because I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat, so I have no idea.
Oh, sure. So it's just Susan and I that have questions at this point, but I'm happy for you to crack on and we can ask at the end. And I'll just keep an eye on what the questions are.
Okay. Yeah,
Sound
happy
good?
with that. Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. Sorry, let me get my notes back up. Presenter view. Haha. Cool. Okay, so how do you lie usefully? This is where we're going to start to get like a little bit more practical, and where I am going to start sounding a bit more like a blog on consulting than a sort of philosophical rant. But real quick, just to hammer this home, I want to talk about some examples of what I think are some useful lies and abstractions. Market ROI, like this is a useful lie. It is never true that you have successfully captured either all of your expenses or all of the value that you've actually made, right? Like if you think that you've made money, then what you've done is you've actually picked a window of time over which you've made money. There are tons of ways in which that's wrong, but it's important. Otherwise, we would never know how to like improve our marketing, right? If we didn't pick that level of abstraction. NPS scores, right? NPS scores have all sorts of ways in which they'll actually mangle the distribution of your of your feedback, right? Like they're expecting a very specific distribution of NPS scores, which they then roll up. So if you don't have that, it's going to look weird, but it's better than an average. It's more effective than an average. So we call that a simplifying abstraction over the extremely complicated question of like, why do people like us and how much? Churn metrics, again, there are so many like abstractions and assumptions that go into churn metrics, but at the end of the day, if you see the number that you choose improving or getting worse, then that is something that your UX people will be very happy with, right? And all of those assumptions are like your problem, not theirs. Monthly recurring revenue, yet again, full of assumptions, full of interesting caveats, but as long as that number is going up, you can be reasonably confident that this is working. Anonymous user tracking, right? Again, GA is the worst at this, right? Talking about new users versus old users, talking about sessions. These are largely arbitrary definitions, but because we all agree on them, and because they allow us to not think about this stuff beyond where we're sitting, they become very useful, right? And they allow us to sort of move forward. Email open rates are another great one, right? Like anyone who does email marketing knows that like you don't necessarily like actually successfully track when somebody opens an email, but hey, you know, it's cool. It's fine, because as long as that number goes up, you're doing well. So they're useful. And they mean that you don't have to talk to your marketing manager about pixels and, you know, whether or not images get loaded with an email, right? So it is your job to understand the factors that matter. The key concept is that stakeholders have shockingly limited bandwidth. As the expert, you need to give them permission to not think, right? So it is our job to build and maintain the simplifying abstractions across an organization that allow the communication of these complex business ideas. Sorry, I've lost my presenter thing again. Oh God, one sec. There we are. So building and then maintaining these abstractions requires a few things. One, it requires that you do actually understand the problems and objectives of your non-technical stakeholders. Two, it requires that you actually gain license and trust to provide this abstraction, because people's immediate reaction to a sense like this will be that, no, I do need as much data as possible, which is wrong, but it's a human reaction. Three, you need to establish and maintain a consistent layer of abstraction. You need to police that and enforce that across the organization. And then three, you need to validate that good decisions are actually, four rather, you need to validate that good decisions are in fact being made with this. So I'm going to go through these one by one. Firstly, how do you know what information allows people to make good decisions? Like, at the end of the day, I believe that data and analytics do need to be consultative partners instead of simply having a responsibility that ends at the edge of the workbook. Just from an organizational point of view, there has to be an in-depth understanding of what people are trying to achieve. And that involves understanding their KPIs and their goals and their vocabulary and the universe they exist within, right? So not only should you be aware of their KPIs and goals, but ideally to some extent, you know, data or some level of consideration of the data and analytics infrastructure of the organization should have gone into the setting of these KPIs and OKRs and whatever else people are held to. Because, you know, you're going to be, you know, the process by which these things are measured is going to come out of a data product that is probably going to have your fingerprints on it anyway. But then finally, like, I do in fact advocate for embedded or specialized analysts over generalists across an organization. Or if you have generalists across an organization, they should have like very well established sort of lines of communication with the people doing the complicated work. That is a gorgeous cake. So secondarily, you need to gain license and trust in your organization. So this is a little bit fluffier, right? But when saying, hey, we are going to build a set of metrics and a set of abstractions that make it easy for us to talk about you know, a certain set of things, I would argue that you should be open about this as a project, and then you know, actually talk to the people who are going to be using these metrics. You know, you can't deceive people, as I said up front, but you should make it obvious that what you're doing is going to improve the communication and increase bandwidth by getting everyone on the same page. So you need to confirm with stakeholders when you're attempting to establish what these abstractions or what these metrics should be, that they believe it will actually solve their problem. And then ideally find an ally on the next level of management up higher than yourself who can really sort of champion and lead this, because that is like the easiest bandwidth hack of all time, is getting somebody who goes to more senior meetings than you do. And then finally, like, you really want to not be wrong too often as a data and analytics team. The benefit of forcing people to sort of forage for themselves is that you're never wrong, right? You just provided a lot of data, and as long as the data was objectively correct, it's not your problem if somebody misinterpreted it. As soon as you are starting to like own and maintain the abstractions of that data that the organization uses, you have to respond to downtimes and problems extremely quickly. It's like Facebook would never go down. And the reason it would never go down is because if it went down, people would start going away and using other websites. As soon as your data is wrong, people will go and get other data, right? So you are increasing the level of, it's a more onerous task for you, but I think it is essential in the long run. Finally, tertiarily, establish a consistent layer of abstraction, right? So you need a clear vocabulary for the metrics at play. And once you've worked out what it is that's going to allow people to move in the right direction and what the levers are that they have available to them, as data and analytics, you're in a good position to establish a vocabulary for how you will talk about this. A really good example from Koala, actually, is the difference between a forecast and a target, right? So for a long period of time, we were using the words forecast and target not interchangeably, but almost interchangeably. And because obviously, like, forecasting is actually an extremely complicated process that speaks more to a probabilistic range of values than a point estimate, whereas a target is an aspiration at a specific point. It's really important when you understand when you're talking about an aspiration versus a range of probabilities. And that's just an example of where we abstracted it down to target setting based upon forecasting and domain expert input, right? And then we would call that the target, and all of the understanding of how that's not necessarily the best forecast of what's going to happen, but it's our intention, is built into that language, and it's our job to push that around the rest of the organization. Secondly, just ensuring that all of the reporting available to stakeholders is either in line with that abstraction or compatible with it at the same level. So there needs to be, if you are building a layer of protection around a particular metric, you want to make sure that it's not leaky, that people aren't sort of going around it and calculating it themselves in odd ways. And this is not running over to somebody's computer when they open up GA and smacking them over the back of the head, but it speaks more to processes and expectations, right? People need to know where to go to get the data, and that data needs to be reasonably available. And then finally, you do in fact want to achieve explicit sign-off on the data products that you provide, and then update them only as agreed. So keep things as static as possible. That means either yourselves in data or other people who might have access to these data products are not able to change them willy-nilly. It should be pretty much on you only. Sort of finally, validating that good decisions are being made, right? So you've gone through this process where you've realized that there is a communications problem, good data is not being acted upon. You have established that there would be a simplifying abstraction of all of the data that is available to the organization into a metric which is more actionable by a particular end user. And now you see that stakeholder or end user is actually using the data. You need to validate as a team that this means that things are getting better, right? So firstly, are KPIs improving from using this stuff? Are decisions being made more quickly? Do end users feel well serviced, right? All of that kind of obvious stuff where you want to see that the world is improving in a step change or stepwise manner from when you instituted this. But more importantly, and I think more directly, do you see that the actions being taken reflect a reasonable consideration of the underlying data? So to validate an abstraction that you are taking, to validate that it is in fact useful and not simply misleading, you need to do a sanity check and say, are we seeing people react the way that it would be reasonably expected to react to the underlying data? Make sure that you're not getting too far away from reality. So then, in summary, to lie usefully, you need to summarize the complexity that you understand into an abstraction that works well in the stakeholders' context. You need to be a trusted consultative partner and not just a spreadsheet jockey. You need to continue to monitor the effectiveness of these abstractions, of these useful lies, and then you need to enforce this as long as it is working. This is probably the hardest part. because every organization is different in this way. But we're all humans. We just want simplicity. So some quick caveats before I get to the questions, because I can see a bunch of stuff flashing up in the chat. If comms are working, you don't need this. But if they're not, you probably need it more, right? Like this is an iterative process. It's not something you go through once. Secondly, this is not about like withholding detail necessarily, but don't offer it up. If somebody like needs more data or needs more detail, then that's an opportunity for you to like work with them and to understand perhaps their context better. But you don't give somebody everything up front. Finally, or not finally, again, I keep doing that. Sorry, I normally talk in threes. Tertiarily, you can educate down or horizontally, but usually not up, right? Like this is just something else that I've discovered. If you need to like tweak an abstraction, or if there is like a peer of yourself in the organization, you can work like with them over a longer period to make sure that you develop in common an understanding of the data which works and is quick to communicate. When communicating upwards, you're almost never going to have that luxury, unfortunately. So you should prepare for that and build your abstractions, build a greater layer or a more simplified layer of extraction, something to expect. And then this applies to face-to-face comms, which I think has been implied in this, but also to static reports and self-service BI, right? So if you're building data products that other people are going to use, or if there's like a data mart, then those abstractions should be front and center. It shouldn't be easy to like break through them, because that will undermine like everything else you have. So yeah, I think those are sort of random caveats, right? Like what, half an hour now or something? Didn't feel like that long. Questions? How are we doing?
So Tom,
Yes.
what we might do is, can I just get you to stop screen sharing, so we can see all the people, which would be good. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, can we get some happy hands as a clapping thing? Because that was yeah, really amazing, and also such a good fun topic for our first virtual discussion, because I think it's going to be like really setting people off in lots of interesting questions. One of the things that happens when I'm a moderator is that I'm often selfish and I ask the first question, which I'm going to do right now. So scenario, you have an A/B test that is not reached significance. And this actually happened a few weeks ago. One analyst told the stakeholder, no, you can't have it, it's not ready. The other analyst told the stakeholder, here are the results, you really shouldn't use them. Where do you think these two sit on your spectrum of lie, not lie? Like, or is there a third option that we haven't considered?
So just between those two options, I would say you can't have it, it's not ready. That being said, I actually think even that is not a strong enough level of abstraction, right? Because we could sit here and talk about like A/B tests and like multi-armed bandit algorithms and like t-tests and things and say, oh, it's interesting, like, should we just run a test until it achieves significance? Well, like, no, we actually shouldn't, right? We should pick an effect size and we should see if after the amount of traffic that we believe would validate that effect size, whether or not we've gotten a validation. If we don't have enough data by the time we thought we would, maybe you go back to them and say, test didn't work, or test was inconclusive, right? So that's an even stronger layer of like simplification. So you don't say, ooh, it's not ready yet. Currently the p-value is only this, we need to wait longer. You just say, test was inconclusive. Do another test.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to pick out some people from chat. I am happy for people to kind of jump in politely and ask their question, because there's a lot of questions going.
Tell you what.
I've got Michael.
Michael.
Michael, do you want to unmute yourself? I'm happy to read it out. For people in marketing, do you think there is a strong enough emphasis on ROO over ROI in order to bridge our language with our non-technical stakeholders, as they typically only speak in money form? It seems people working in marketing often have to prove themselves in worth to obtain license trust from the business.
So I hope that this doesn't mean that you all decide that listening to me wasn't a good idea. What do you mean by ROO, just to clarify?
That's from Michael. Michael, do you want to jump in?
Return on opportunity.
He's got no mic. Okay.
Return on opportunity investment. Okay, so I actually don't know what you mean by return on opportunity. I don't know if I'm alone in that. Do you mean like in terms of what else we could have done with that investment? What we like. Let me perhaps go to the second half of the question, right? Because I think I get the thrust of what you mean. When it comes to communicating like marketing analytics specifically, and as you can tell, a lot of what I was talking about was pretty like marketing analytics heavy. Obviously, like businesses are around to make money, right? And so an ROI is very important, but like you need to agree on the parameters of that, because if you agree that there is a certain sort of universe in which your ROI figures make sense, or that there is a certain like goal, or there is a certain like priority, and then move towards those numbers, towards that priority within that universe, within those bounds, then everyone else should be happy, right? And I think that's a good example. Finance doesn't care about what your media mix was. They just care that their spreadsheet makes sense. So you need to understand their spreadsheet and understand the line item that you form on that. And then as long as your number comes in okay, I'm not going to hassle you too much, right? Because it's your job to understand the opportunities and the investments and how that stuff gets moved around. But yeah, sorry, I got caught up on the ROO.
Okay, we'll move on to one from Laurie. A useful lie could be a double-edged sword. I wonder if triangular answers might work here, giving increasing levels of detail and letting the reader choose at what level they want to consume it.
So yes, I think that is a good point. What I have found, and this is throughout my entire career, ranging from being a like 19-year-old web developer in my uni degree to being a like member of management at Koala. If you give somebody the option of more information, they will take it. Almost always. And that doesn't necessarily mean that them having that extra information is a good idea. A person's like appetite for information usually exceeds their stomach for information, if that makes sense. So yes, like you should be able to give somebody more information as required, but the process of determining if they require more information should be like linked integrally to understanding whether or not the communication that you've had has been effective. So if your abstraction is too simple, is not enough for them to like pull the levers that they need to pull and achieve the outcomes they need to achieve, then yeah, increase the level of detail. That's why it should be an iterative process, but not upfront, not without a strong reason to.
Okay, we've got one from Sarah here. Hi, Sarah. It's really nice to see you. A lot of the time, people just want data to justify their thoughts, and usually you can find data that helps people justify their argument. Do you find yourself leaning towards helping their argument otherwise, or I guess otherwise posing counter arguments?
So this like, it's very important here to understand what their objective is. And like, yeah, when somebody, like when you're doing a piece of analysis for somebody and you know that, for example, they're attempting to make a business case for a relatively simple like trial of something, and they need to know, hey, like, is it reasonable that XYZ thing would work or not work, or like, what are the parameters to this? You have a lot of power there, but what I try to do in that instance is, this is what I was saying before, focus on the second conversation they're going to have, right? So frame your answer in what they're going to be able to go and tell other people, right? Again, calling on experience. There was a particular sort of extension to the user experience that was relatively expensive for us that we wanted to undertake, right? And it was, to roll out a trial was extremely cheap, right? So with potentially a reasonable upside. Getting asked to provide a like really ironclad business case for it, my team was brought in, or a member from my team was brought in, just to like look at the potential uplift that we could see over a couple of metrics if we did this. And the answer was like, honestly, the fuck knows, right? Like, we've never done this before. So because it's extremely cheap and like it's not actually that big of a deal if it does or does not go ahead, you know, at that point, it's about triaging your own time and saying, all right, well, look, the potential impact of this program is somewhere between like 0 and a lot. So like, yeah, we should try it out. Like, there isn't a strong reason to not try it out, right? Subsequently, we went and launched a pilot of this program, comes back and says, like, we need to measure the ROI from this. Turns out, the program was way smaller than it should have been. Measuring the ROI was not going to happen, right? Like, it was a really, really small number of users who had engaged in this. And at this point, we did not find evidence of ROI from this, is the answer that comes back. So instead of talking about, well, you could run a longer pilot program, or like, you know, here are the possibilities, simplifying it down again to the next conversation that person's going to have, you know, we did not find like a meaningful return on investment from this. Didn't obviously like, you know, lose us money, but no, you know, broadly no. I think a lot of the problems that analysts have are when there isn't a good answer, when there's a lot of uncertainty in the answer, and you need to be comfortable just saying there's a lot of uncertainty here, or this like, if you can point at one metric and say that metric is not going to come back with the number that you want, you're in a better position to attempt to convey that uncertainty, instead of suddenly talking about like probability distributions and things. And Simon, you're kind of making me nervous.
He's making me nervous too. Now, I want you all to imagine that you invite Tom along for a drink at 6 o'clock on a Friday, and this is the exact type of conversation we got embroiled into, and all my bosses were a little bit freaked out, but I loved every second of it. So what we're going to do now, I'm just conscious of time, is I'm going to break us all out into our breakout rooms, and we can have a bit of a chat. I might go with 10 minutes, just given time. If you're all violently opposed to that, you can let me know afterwards. And yeah, like, good luck. I have no idea how this is going to go. Okay, so we've got John Ekman, who has actually moved from Europe and come down to Sydney for a bit of a career break / still a career thing, which is entertaining. But also for the poor guy, he moved to Sydney and then this whole lockdown thing happened. So I feel has yet to actually experience Sydney. And he is talking today about, if data is the new oil, what is behavioural data? And while he's here in Sydney, he's working with New Republique, who run a really fantastic CRO conference. So I'm going to mute myself and hand over to John.
Thank you. And I'll just hit share screen, and then I hope it's going to do the trick for me. Can everybody see the oil pumping here? Is that good? It looks good. Moe gives me a thumbs up, and it seems like you can hear me then as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Moe and the team, for inviting me. Last week when we discussed this, I wanted to find a title, something like, if data is the new oil, then behavior data must be. And then I actually bounced that thing back to the team, because it's like the platinum, the gold, the super, like, what would that be? I just couldn't figure it out. So I want to leave it with you for this session to think about that a little bit. I think I actually came up with at least one answer, which I'll present at the end, but I'd like you guys to think about it a little bit. So just to a little bit short of me here. I'm just gonna move my little tile here where I see all you guys so that I can see you and not cover my slides at the same time. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm John Ekman. I'm a founder of a company called Conversionista. So we're an experimentation agency, a CRO agency in Scandinavia, in Stockholm. Started it on my own. We're 60 people now. Then I reached out to Nima and Stacy that runs New Republic, and I wanted to, I've been doing it for 10 years, so I wanted to keep on doing it, but still finding an experience that was slightly different. So I said, like, I've done this for 10 years, I grew to 60 people, why don't I come down and, you know, work with you guys for a while? So here I am in Sydney, landed in the middle of the bushfires. It was really, really nervous going here in the middle of all that. And then we had, which I can tell you privately, later we had like 2 really freak accidents, and then when we had recovered from that, the corona thing hit. So it's somebody said, like, Australia is tough and it'll test you, and Australia has really put us to the test. So if we can survive this, then we'll be cool. So what I do a lot of training. So what I came down here to Australia to do is to help New Republic with the training. I spoke at a lot of, I listed some here on the slide. I've spoken at all like the major events in the US and in Europe and so on. So that's me. And the perception you have of me here, I'm sitting on my terrace in my down jackets because I need to be outside. It's mayhem inside. So because I do online training, I sit in front of the brick wall at the office. So in order to fake that training environment, I took an image of the brick wall, and now I can tell everybody I'm in the office, even though I'm at home. So here's a little bit just about New Republic. We're an experimentation, conversion optimization agency, and here's our, you know, the usual brag slide. Here's some of the brands that we work with. Some of them are of course struggling right now. So some of the other ones, they're keeping up good. So we're in the same kind of messy situation as everybody else. So I'm going to talk today about behavior data. I'm incredibly flattered to be invited. Thank you, Moe and the team, so much. I'm also a little bit nervous because, like, when you speak to data, no, I'm saying data because I acquired English in the US. So I'm not doing the data thing. Maybe I can. You can help me, guys, and by, you know, giving me an ugly wave or something when I say data. So let's try data. So the old way we used to do things, basically because we couldn't observe people's actual behavior. We built our stuff, we did our product development, we sold stuff to the resellers, and then it got out in stores and it was bought and it was taken to people's home. And during that whole process, we had really no clue what was really happening with the consumer. It was kind of fingers crossed. So then we went out and asked them a lot of questions about the consumer behavior and what they thought about our products and so on. But now there's a new way. We can actually observe via experiments what their actual behavior is. So now we have a new way of doing this. The problem with a lot of companies is that they haven't really adopted to this. So they are still asking, and they're looking at demographic data to kind of look into that and try to guess about the consumer's behavior. So let's go to the new way instead. And just to give you a little bit about the foundation, about what I'll be talking about. Moe is waving there. Maybe she needs me to slow down. Is that it?
Oh no, those are my happy fingers of clapping.
Okay.
I do love Mr. Kahneman.
Okay.
I'm a big fan.
Okay. I thought it was, John, slow down. Okay. So, yeah, so I just want to do a little bit of foundation around psychology. So I guess a lot of you know about this, have potentially even read Thinking Fast and Slow. Not a lot of people have actually finished it because it's like a very heavy read. So if you want to understand this, you can read Kahneman, or I would also recommend to read Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely instead. It's a much lighter read, but it contains a lot of the same concepts. So I probably recommend Predictably Irrational. The reason I bring this up is because in order to understand some of the things I'm going to be talking about, you need to understand what Kahneman and his colleagues call System 1 and System 2 thinking. So according to Kahneman and his colleagues, the brain has 2 systems. System 1, which is emotional, unconscious, and fast. and system 2, which is rational, conscious, and slow. I just need a bit of water, sorry. So in this family of brains, system 1 is the bigger, the oldest sibling, that basically makes all the decisions. So almost all decision making that happens takes part in the system 1 part of the brain. So, but then when we go out and ask people about their experience, so sorry, could we just ask you a couple of questions about this new Louis Vuitton handbag you bought for $2,000? And then we activate the system 2 part of the brain. And that part of the brain now has to go back to system 1, because strictly speaking, system 2 was kind of snoozing and not really paying attention to when we made that purchase decision. So it has to go back to the system 1 part of the brain and ask you, sorry, but could I just give me a couple of rational explanations for that thing that just happened? Because the system 2 part of the brain, this little part of the brain here, speaks a language that I call rationalese. So it can only interpret the world in rational terms. So what this leads to is that we make emotional decisions which we find rational explanations for. Well, and a lot of you probably know this already through other parts of your work, but really, if you want to understand the scientific explanation behind it, go read Ariely or Kahneman. So we have this situation where we have two worlds. It's what we believe the customers do, and it's what customers think that they do. So we have a little part in the middle that we actually agree on. But this is like an oversimplification. This is maybe a useful lie. I don't know. No, it's not even a useful lie. Because it's much more complicated. We have one more problem. It's the fact that the customers can't even agree with themselves, because when we ask them what they think they do, they will give us one answer. And when we observe their actual behavior, we'll see a different picture. And then on top of that, we have this idea that we have what we believe that the customers do. And as you can see, this Venn diagram has a very, very little intersection there in the middle, very small. So what really actually matters here is the intersection about our beliefs about the customers and their actual behavior. This is like the pot of gold that we want to find. Now, then what happens in companies is that there's a new strategic initiative from the board or the management or something like that. And it's usually called, yeah, I think you've been there already. It's called, let's get close to the customer. Let's listen to the customers. Let's work in partnership with our customer, those kind of things you will hear. So then we start talking with the customers. So we listen, we sit down with them, we have focus groups and things like that, which is basically, we move closer to what customers think they do. But you can see that the intersection between what they actually do hasn't really changed. So where we need to move is to increase the intersection between what our beliefs and, like I said, what their actual behavior is. And this is in essence this. Understanding the customer is about reading the digital footprints. And that's why all the people that are now with me have such fantastic and desirable careers, because like we are the people that actually can do this. So let's look at those digital footprints. So this guy, maybe he works at your office, I don't know. He comes running and he says that he has noticed that sales are down 7% from last month. And he asks, what is going on? And so is he a data-driven guy? Would you say he's data-driven? I call this guy data curious. So usually he don't care about data that much, but then, or data, yeah. And then all of a sudden there's a data outbreak and he runs around like crazy. And actually, did you notice that he already answered his own question? What is going on? Well, sales are down 7%. So the much more difficult question to answer is, why is that happening? So companies that want to go from what I call data curious to this state of bliss, which I call data driven, they often end up in the middle in a stage that I call data focused. So data focus, well, you've been there, you know what data focus is. Like, it's reports and it's dashboards with reports, and it's dashboards inside dashboards and more reports and email with reports and dashboards and polished reports and summaries of reports and things like that. So it's a company that looks at a lot of data, but data doesn't actually drive the decisions that a company is making. So they end up there somewhere in the middle. So we have two problems. The first one is that we don't use data in the right way. That was what I was just talking about. So we use data for reporting. We are focused on it, but it doesn't drive our decisions. Secondly, we don't have the right kind of data. So the type of data that we're using with isn't the right one. So this is now bringing me closer to the topic of this, this talk today, behavior data. So this is how we used to do it. So we have two huge data sets which companies have been working with. It's the attitudinal data set. So these are the beliefs and thoughts about our brand versus other brands that customers hold. And secondly, we have the demographic data set. So these two data sets have been really strong with companies. I like it to give a quote. It's pretty long. It's a difficult one, so I'll try to read it a little bit slow. Brian Eisenberg in the US, some of you might know him. Has become by now a good friend, and I've taken a lot of inspiration from him. I don't know a lot of people that has written several New York Times book bestsellers. He's probably the only one I know. So, but here's a quote from one of his blog posts. He says, then we often see these extravagant personas that are delivered by many agencies, and they are great when you look at the canned demographics and pseudo-psychographics that they pull out that might be relevant to how they buy media. And the last part here is relevant to how they buy media. So the reason we've been looking at demographical data and attitudinal data is because it's highly relevant to when we buy media. So if you want to, if you say that we are trying to like with this new product, we want to target this persona who uses the public transport, who's an affluent person who lives in the coastal zones of Sydney, for example. Well, so then then you can put up ads at the bus stops in like Manly and Bondi and where not, right? So then it's really good for buying media. But when these canned demographics and pseudo-psychographics, when they arrive at your website, it like the relevance of that data is much smaller. And I'm going to show you this with an example. So bear with me a little bit because this is in Swedish. But sometimes when you actually look at screenshots with another language, it's pretty good because then you can't use the language as a guide. You have to interpret it just by looking at the visual flows. So we were tasked of optimizing a landing page for savings advisory. So people that were thinking about their retirement, we wanted to help them making decisions about where to invest their money. So we had two hypotheses about how this page could work. It both started with the eyes of the person because we often focus on other people's faces and other people's eyes. So we said probably the visitor is going to look at the eyes first, and then they go to this little cloud that has a couple of questions. So, and if the person reads those, he will understand that, oh, they understand my questions. And then you can go to the answers to those questions, which you see here to the right. And then after that first top trajectory is done, two things can happen. Either continue the kind of arc and goes down towards that button, which we want them to push. Or secondly, because we read left to right, maybe the person goes back and reads it left to right in a kind of Z-like pattern. So depending on which of these two things are true, we're going to put the button either on the left or in the right-hand panel. So we were discussing at the office, like which one of these like hypotheses do we seems like the most plausible one. But the good part here, like we're data-driven. We're a data-driven agency. So guess what? We have data to show us this. So let's look at the data. This is the data set from this project. It's actually from this very project. So this person is a man. As you can see, he's 43. He's been to university. He's full-time employed. He makes a lot of money. He lives in some of the bigger cities in Stockholm. If you look at the lower panel here, he likes shoes, computers, wine, travel, restaurants, golf, skiing, sailing, stocks, wine tasting, that kind of stuff. That's good. So we actually do have a lot of data on this person. So now let's look at this. So we have these two alternatives. So he's a golfer. The golfer, they always want the button on the left. Golfers, they prefer the left or the right. And he lives in Stockholm, so that's clearly a right? And he was, what was it, 43? The 43-year-old is always the button on the left, always. Or was it the other way around? I can't remember. So my point here is that this data is useless here. Like, so we're looking at this demographic data set, which was the only data set we were giving to optimize this project, and it's completely useless to us. So what we did, what we did that after a while, we went kind of, what are we doing? Like, so we took our eye tracking equipment and we went down to a coffee shop and we gave 10 people some vouchers, and we came back with these 2 eye tracking heat maps. So as you can see on the left-hand side, people will first look to the left, then go to the right here, and then they go down to this section, and not very much happens on the right-hand side. And then, as you can see here, left, right, down to the left, and not much happens on the right. So obviously this this Z-like pattern was the one that was dominant here. So then we can go back and find an alternative based on the behavior data that we were using in this project. So the takeaway from this is that if we want to change behavior, we must focus on behavior data. Conversion rate optimization, experimentation is about, of course, increasing conversion rates, increasing the checkout rate, and increasing what kind of metric. But in order for that metric to be fulfilled, what you're really moving, the needle you're moving, is the customer's behavior. And if you want to change the behavior, you must understand your behavior data or data. So I'm going to show you here a little example again from Sweden, but I brought it up because I think it's like a really beautiful example. So my dishwasher broke down, so I wanted to get a dishwasher. I just recorded this. It's not a client. I just found it on the interwebs. So somebody said, you should buy one of these Miele ones because they last a lot longer, so you don't have to go through this shit again. So I found that I went to this website. I found the Miele G4910 scubbers, which you're all familiar with, like the the all-time Miele classic, right? So, and then I highlight this product text, and what happens here? It says we offer a price guarantee. So what they have found out, probably with a tool like Hotjar or something like that, they found out that people are highlighting this product text. But that is only what is happening. So now they need to answer the question, why is it happening? Well, it's probably because they're gonna copy that product text, and they're gonna paste it into a price comparison site and find out the best price. So now if we know that, what is the best counter tactic we can offer? Well, it's of course to offer a price guarantee, not like generally on the site, but in this very place where this happens, because you don't know Swedish, so you wouldn't have understood this. But for Swedish people, I asked them, like, you're smart people, so you probably noticed that they are already offering a price guarantee up here, right? So this is what a lot of websites do. Look, here's a price guarantee. But what you need to understand is that when people come to your website, they're looking at it like it's like they have a toilet roll, and they're looking at it, they're staring at it like this, so they have a very myopic view of what's going on the screen. So let's take another example. I'm booking a flight ticket. So it's going to cost me, as you can see here, it's going to cost me like something like 500 Australian dollars for me to buy this flight ticket. And the only thing I have to do is click this continue button here, and the money that I have will now be theirs, like, and for a seat that otherwise would have been empty if I didn't buy it. So I'm just going to fill in my my details here. I click the continue button, and no, there's an error on the page. Where's the error? Can you see the error? Anybody see the error? No, you can't, because it's down there, right? So they had an error message for me not completing a checkbox, and the checkbox is like below the fold on desktop. So I don't have access to their data, so I haven't seen this. But I swear on desktop, 95% of the users, they go through this experience. And also I know that, but they don't know that, because what I did, I checked this. I checked the tracking code for this. So they're not tracking that event. So they have no idea this is going on. So they don't know that 95% of the desktop users are receiving that message. What I'm trying to say with this is that our visitors are constantly trying to tell us things, and the only thing we have to do is start listening. It's not a technical issue. It's a mindset issue of listening to the customers through observing their behavior data. Now I'm not going to do what Tom said. I'm not going to say it finally. I'm going to say halfway through. I'm going to show you another case of a that we have. So I'm trying to illustrate my point about the relevance and the value of behavior data by showing a couple of cases that we have done. So this is B2C financial services. So their funnel was pretty simple. Just going to take a little bit of water. So their funnel was very simple. So there's a landing page that takes you here's a landing page. It takes you to an application form, and then there's a thank you page. That's like super, super simple. So we looked in Google Analytics to figure out where the problem was. So we looked at, now we're looking at quantitative data. Quantitative data, Google Analytics says bounce rate is pretty okay. It's not too bad. It's not the worst we've seen. Okay. What about click-through rate? Click-through rate on this pink button here it's okay, not bad. Okay. So what about the form conversion rate? Oh my God, people are dying in there. It's like almost nobody makes it through that horrible form. Okay, so now conversion optimizers go to work. We're trying to figure out what to do. Maybe, we can do something about the form. Let's check it out. So we use Hotjar. So we do session recordings on the form. We do 200 of them. A very unusual pattern appears. It's a very binary. So people either fill in the whole form or they don't even start at all. Now this is quite unusual because usually there's some gradual drop off in the form. But here it's like completely binary. So now we're starting to think like, what if people don't even start? Maybe they're, not even in the right place, right? So what we do then, we do an exit intent poll. So for the people that came to this only to the form page, not the whole web page in general, but only to the form page, if they were trying to exit, we ask them, what did you want to do on this page? And I think the beauty of these exit intent polls in the right place is that you don't ask all users about their opinions about the website. You target a very specific segment, which is your problematic segment, the ones that are leaving on this page. And now you're asking them, what did you want to do there? And about half of them said they come to this page to find out more information. And now you go like, what, are they stupid or what? I mean, seriously, look, read the text. It says apply now. Why did you click apply now to find more information? Are you stupid or what? But then let's backtrack now to what we talked about. This is the reason I brought up Kahneman and that in the beginning. So when the system one part of the brain looks at this page, it's going to go like, yeah. Oh, sorry. It's going to go like, yeah, USBs, whatever, button, I'll click it, figure out what happens. And then what happens? Boring form. This is not what I was looking for. I'm out of here. So the system one part of the brain like miserably fails at this page. So the form was not the problem. It was the symptom. So if we had acted only on the quantitative data here, we would have seen that all the people were dropping off in the form. So we would have tasked ourselves with optimizing that form, only looking at the quantitative data. So what we then did, we said like, well, let's add the read more button there. So now we give people who have like slightly lower intent on this page an out so they can read more before they're trying to apply. I'm sorry, I'm hitting the continue button here. I need to change my posture. So so we increased that. This little button was worth something for them like I think it was $500,000 Australian dollars on a yearly basis. So that's a pretty good job for a little button. And I usually tell people like, if this was what we could achieve on this like 3-page flow, just imagine how many web pages that you have and how much money you're leaving on the table by not having this approach. So, and now you might be asking yourself to add a read more button and A/B test it. It's not really rocket science, is it? It's not like John Ekman invented the read more button and I'm going to get the Nobel Prize for it. No, it's not. I didn't invent the read more button. The whole point of this case is that I think it is a bit of rocket science, because when you work with a process, for example, the one we have at New Republic, then you cover all these pieces. You cover the behavior and the motivation. You cover the qualitative research. You cover the quantitative analytics. You're looking at your database of past. So when you have this kind of repeatable framework, this framework or another framework, and you work with it and you repeat it, then you will arrive at these results over and over again. So now this is actually the final part. Now for the final part, I'm not actually tracking my time here. I hope I'm okay, Moe. Good, yeah, thumbs up there. So speaking a little bit about quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data answers what is going on. It's a stupid counter. Qualitative data answers the why. It's like the answer to why is this stuff happening. So if you want to work with these two data sets, these two behavioral data sets, I would say the reason I put these slides in for today is that in my work, I've been working now 10 years with this thing called conversion optimization, experimentation, whatever you want to call it. And I've seen that the most interesting trend that I've seen in, I would say, the last 3 years is the combination of quantitative and qualitative data. So people are taking these two data sets and they're combining them, and when they do that, like magic really happens. So let's look at it a little bit in a little bit more detail. I think if what's a little bit sad still is that sometimes in a lot of organizations, these two data sets and these two methods actually don't meet. So quantitative data that's for business owners. It's in reporting, forecasted. It's for ongoing business, and it's very interesting for management. Whereas the qualitative data is often heralded by product owners. It's used for insights. It's used for new products, and a lot of people that work with it are kind of enthusiasts. They've seen the power in it, so they kind of toil on in their world. And if you look at it from a how big part of the pie do they both take, I would say that quantitative data has a much bigger role in most of the companies that I have worked with, at least. So the two ways that you can combine these, I call them quantifying and qualifying. So the two ways that we can work in two different directions. So this is, I think this is the part where I would really appreciate some questions and some feedback, because this one, there's so many approaches you can do this, and I try to kind of, out of all the projects that I've been doing, I try to pick out some general traits and create these two ways of seeing it, but I could also be wrong. So please correct me if I'm wrong. So quantifying is that you have qualitative data, and now you want to quantify it. So you come up with like rough hypothesis. It's built on best practices, previous experience, user research, etc. And now you want to quantify it with additional quantitative data. So it tells you, you have seen in your research that this is a problem, this is an opportunity, but you really don't know, is it a big opportunity or a small opportunity? The warning sign here is, of course, confirmation bias. So when you're doing this, you already have a belief about what is going on, what is the problem, what could we do, and now you're just looking for quantification of the problem. So if you find that evidence, check, I was right, yes, man, I'm a genius, right? So that's what we need to look out for here. So it's going to show an example that we did. So here's a e-commerce site. You can buy, of course, something. You can also add it to your wish list. Oh, that's good. If you do that, you have to log in. If you're not a user on this website already, you have to create an account. Like if you hit that button, then this is a form on your mobile that you need to complete. So this is the steps you have to go through if you, as a new user, wants to add something to the list. So from our heuristics point of view, not through user research in this case, but basically from our knowledge about this stuff, our conclusion of this is like, nobody got time for that. It's like, I would never invest in completing that form just to add something to the wish list. You can forget about that. So that's a qualitative insight built on previous experience. But then we went to the quant data to figure out what it actually meant. So we did two segments. So we looked at the events where they added this to the wish list, and then we created a segment of they looked at the e-commerce conversion rate for those that had that event, the wish list event, and it was 6.3%. And if that wish list was not the wish list event was not present, the conversion rate would be 0.68. So it was 10 times higher for the people that used the event wish list. But then we looked at the users that actually used it. It was only 214 that actually used it, and it was 357,000 that didn't use it. So what we see here, what the quantitative data says, is this is a very valuable function which is used by almost nobody. So now we could take both the quantitative and the quantitative approach and kind of triangulate in on the problem and come up with this data to the stakeholders to show them, like, if we think you have a serious business potential by making it much more easy to use this function. So the second approach is qualifying. Now you have quantitative data and you want to qualify it. So what you do then, first you dig into your quantitative data to find patterns, anomalies, outliers, things like that. So you see, oh, something is brewing here, something is cooking. Here's a problem. Here's an opportunity. I wonder why could that be? And then you need to again use your heuristics, so you use the research, etc. So I'm going to show you a case that we did for a IP telephony company called Rebtel. Not people using WhatsApp and Messenger and whatnot, but they were pretty big a couple of years ago. So a lot of people would use this service. They were a lot of them that were like migrant workers, and they would use this IP telephony to call home, right? So we're just going through, looking at the success rate, the conversion rate for a huge set of landing pages. This was a client that had tons and tons and tons of landing pages. And then what happened? We found an outlier. So we found a landing page that converted like crazy. This graph is just a kind of a mock-up. I just created it to show you what I mean. So one of the landing pages was converting like crazy compared to all the other ones. So then now let's take our heuristics methods and look at this at this page compared to the other ones. So what really separated this landing page from almost all the other landing pages was that it had a flag. So you're using this to call to Nigeria, and then it showed Nigeria's flag, and then it has some check marks at the bottom. But I think the real big difference here, from a psychology point of view, was that it was showing people what they were getting instead of how much it was going to cost them. So this landing page says you're going to get 800 minutes to call for. All the other ones says it's going to cost you $24.90. So this is, from a psychology point of view, a completely different proposal. So what we were able to do here, like looking at it like this, is like this is a perfectly viable test candidate. So let's take this approach and then roll it out to a number of landing pages, and the effect for this company was enormous. I can't tell you the data, but it was a really big shift in their incomes when they started to do this instead. So yeah, so that was the last part. In order to sum up what I was talking about here, I guess the key things that I've been seeing is I see that a lot of companies are still, when we go to a client, a new client perhaps, and we ask them, like, do you have data about your customers? And then we get thrown at us these like personas and demographies and attitudinal studies and things like that, and we ask them, like, where's your behavioral data? And they come up a little bit more short. But what we have seen in our work is that the behavioral data really makes a difference. And the behavioral data is made up of two subsets, the quantitative and the qualitative data. And I think organizations have a huge potential in forming teams that are able to work with both these two aspects in the project and not having them honestly like siloed, like sadly enough a lot of companies have. And like that can really pull out the potential of this. So yeah, so I just want to say, as I said, I'm doing a lot of teaching here. We have courses on CRO and user experience, and we also run a course called Conversion Manager, where you basically go through all the steps that you need to understand of being the conversion manager and running the experimentation program in your company. So that's a small little like a commercial break here from my point of view. If you want to join me in one of my trainings, check this out on this link here. And then the last thing I'm going to do, I want to ask you a question. If you're thinking about, I asked you this question in the beginning. If data is the new oil, behavior data is, what is behavior data? So that's the question I was asking. I think I have a kind of a clue. Anybody want to jump in and give me, I don't see the chat. So did anybody answer in the chat perhaps?
Not as of yet.
Okay.
We've got a couple of questions, but not someone specifically answering that.
Okay, so well, you can see it now. It came up on the screen. my answer to this question is, if data is the new oil, behavior data is rocket fuel. So that's
we've got the new machinery from Stephen.
Okay.
We've got natural gas from Jonathan.
I don't like natural gas because natural gas is just what do you say? It's a fossil industry that takes away the connotation of a fossil fuel by calling it the natural when it's actually fossil fuel. So I don't like the term natural gas, but let's not go down that road tonight. Okay.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
From Gareth, what are your top 5 CRO tools to access the behavioral data?
Well, I mean, of course, the web analytics tools, and that it would be number one. I usually call it's the mothership of analytics. But then the second tool, which I guess a lot of you work with already, would be the full story, or the Hotjar, or for more advanced customers, maybe something like Decibel Insights. So some of those tools that capture, that do session recordings, that do click maps, that do heat maps, that do scroll maps, and all those things. So it's so valuable to be able to find a page through your quantitative analysis, and you say to yourself, we got a problem on this page. We have no idea what this is. And then you put on screen recordings, you do click maps, and then now you're starting to figure out what is really, really going on that page. I think one of the most beautiful things about, let's say, for example, Full Story, that is a partner of ours, is that not a lot of people think about that. But when you get a click map in a tool like that, you track clicks on things that are not clickable. So the web analytics tools, they only track clicks on clickable things. So as soon as you click on something which is not clickable, it doesn't register in Google Analytics, for example. So then a lot of pages have what I call click waste. So people are wasting their clicks on unclickable things, and you need to detect the click waste, because the click is a signal of the user's intent to do something. And when they click and nothing happens, you're losing. They're showing an intent, and you're not monetizing. You're not capitalizing on that intent. And so by finding out that click waste, you can achieve great things.
We also have a compliment from Corinne. Love your slides, John. Super slick. And then we have a question from Ronnie. What are other options for getting behavioral data? Clients tend to be concerned about security and page load issues with session recording tools like Hotjar. Eye tracking would be super costly.
Yeah. So of course, then you can go into user research. So user research, you can do either remote user testing. We do that a lot at Republique. So then you're basically recording what's going on the screen of the user. You can use the webcam, and then they can make comments in real time when they do, or you can do what's called a retroactive think aloud. So you first record the experience, and then you play back the movie, and then they can comment on what they did. So that's a very nice tool. If you want to, I think there's a tip which a lot of people, I don't know, in this crowd, there's a really cool technique which you can just Google it. It's called laptop hugging, and laptop hugging is if you want to, I mean, now so many of our customers are on mobile, so you really want to capture the mobile experience. And how do you do that? Well, you put them in front of a computer, and you turn the computer the other way around, and then you let the camera on the computer record what is going on on the screen, that is on their mobile screen, the tablet or their phone. So that's a very easy way to actually capture what's going on the mobile. So if you want to, it's a little bit hard to explain it without showing it, but if you want to check it out, just Google laptop hugging, like user testing through laptop hugging. You'll find some imagery. And user testing is the people that advocate user testing. If you've been reading, for example, like Steve Krug, Don't Make Me Think, and those people, they basically say you should have a budget for user testing. Like we always do it on Fridays between 1 and 3. So it's user testing is not something we never do it, but now we're thinking about launching a new product, and then we actually have to go out and do it. No, it's not like that. Go out and gather insights all the time, so you can complement your quantitative data with qualitative data.
So I'm just going to read the room, and people can tell me if they're violently opposed. But I'm thinking of maybe we ask John a couple more questions, and then we head towards a wrap. I'm just noticing a few people have dropped off. I'm guessing because stomachs are probably grumbling and they're too embarrassed to eat in front of the camera like me. So I will just pursue with a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. So we have a question from Susan, which is that she'd like the definition of CRO that you use, please, which I feel like that's such a contentious question.
Okay, yeah. So I would say CRO, conversion rate optimization, to begin with, it's a kind of a fun backstory with this. Brian Eisenberg, who's sometimes called the godfather of CRO, he wanted to start a business in this, and he was doing sloppy keyword research. So he saw that there was a lot of search volume on the word conversion rate. So he decided to call it conversion rate optimization. And then he optimized for that and started getting a lot of traffic about converting dollars to yens and pounds to kilos and things like that. But then it was too late when he realized his mistake. So people that talk about CRO, they actually want to talk about conversion optimization. The rate is not as interesting as the number of absolute conversions you're getting. And then I would say my definition, it's a practice of assisting users to achieve the goals that they came to fulfill on your website in the interest of their goals and also your goals. So I sometimes in my decks I formulated what I call the first law of conversion. I attribute it, humbly enough to myself. I call it let me see if I get it right now. Conversion happens when your and your visitors' goals meet. Like, so you have goals with your service, and the customers, the visitors, they have goals. When both those two goals are fulfilled, then a conversion happens, or a positive outcome. We're talking about conversion, but conversion could also be a lot of other things than just creating the actual sale. You can also get a lead, you can get engagement. It's really depending on what is the outcome that you want to create. That was a long definition. I'm sorry about that. And you're all hungry. You're hungry and I'm rambling.
It was super interesting. And I like that that reframing of conversion rate to conversion, because I think that's super accurate. Okay, so I'll head on to the last one from Ash.
Could I just say one thing about conversion rates? So also, like sometimes when we're in companies and we want to give the people that depend on us some numbers, so they will ask, like, I need some benchmarks for conversion rate. Like, so we're wondering, like, we're launching this new service, and could you look at what is the conversion rate in our industry? And I think that's the stupidest question you can really ask, because it has so many dependencies on the power of your brand, your pricing, all kinds of things. So a guy called Craig Sullivan, Optimize or Die, which a few might have heard of. He's a very he's a loud talking, swearing Scotsman that has made a lot of impact in this industry. And he says that when people ask him what conversion rate they can get, his answer is always higher than the one you have today. That is really what you're asking. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead with the questions.
No, that's super accurate, and that's a really good point. All right, I'm going to head over to Ash's question. Ash, I also didn't know you had a dog, so I'm very interested by this. Okay, with the current environment, should you stop any experiments? Will the data be contaminated? And when he says a current environment, I assume we're talking about the elephant in the room, which is COVID.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, we're working with one of the biggest chemists here in Australia, so they have tons of traffic. So it's a little bit difficult now because their data is skewed. So I think you need to understand the two horizons here. The first one is that what can you capitalize on in this period? I just saw. So I think that I think a lot of consumers, they will be much more susceptible to messaging around security. Just in general, I saw an ad from Harvey Norman in the Sydney Morning Herald. It was a small ad. It just said "shop with confidence." I don't know really what that means. What do they mean with that? But now they're turning their marketing towards confidence, it seems. So people can be confident about shopping with them. I also noticed if you pay a visit to Booking.com and see what Booking.com that always has these scarcity play. Only 3 rooms left. Book now. Prices are going up, and 380 people are looking at this room right now. Check the website out. It's only about like risk-free. It says risk-free. No prepaid. Like, you can always unbook. It's like their whole site is full with messaging like that. So I think in the short term, I think that you can, if you are agile, you can. People like now to think about. I just gave this. I had a talk about this, and I gave this example. Like I'm just making this up. This might sound like bullshit to you, but let's say that you can say, our sorry, our insurance solutions, they feel like cuddling up with your grandparents in front of the fireplace when you were a kid. So it's like people want to think about these things that feel like it reminds them of how it used to be when they felt secure. So if you can already now do some experiments to tie to those, to those like highly emotional, irrational things, but just, I just want to get out of this COVID thing for a while and think about how it used to be. Well, you can capitalize on that right now. And then I think also we're going to see new consumer patterns be establishing now. So I think a lot of people, what you can do now, you can do a lot of experimentation. You can gather insights. You can do a lot more user research, because I think you're going to benefit from that research once things start to clear out, because I think there's going to be like sort of a new land grab as we're getting out of this. There, like, new patterns are going to establish. There will be new opportunities, and the people that are experimenting the most, they will know most about this new landscape that is emerging. But then on the other hand, for some of us right now, we just need to save our company, and we need to cancel the Friday beers, and we need to close the parking places and whatnot. So I also have a lot of respect that at this time, a lot of company, experimentation is perhaps, they feel like, a little bit of a luxury that they can't afford. The only thing I would urge companies to do that, don't get too stuck in that mindset for too long, because then you're going to miss out on the opportunities that lie ahead.
Okay, huge thanks, John. That was completely terrific. Both you and Tom, I feel like you've set a very, very high bar for our first virtual event. I know that, the chat thread's been going absolutely nuts as people kind of wrap their heads around both of your presentations. John, can I just get you to stop sharing?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's all good.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that.
Not a drama. It's funny what you were just saying, like Bunnings is starting to sell exercise equipment now, and like how businesses pivoting really quickly. It's super interesting. Okay, I'm gonna take over screen sharing. Okay, so if you would like to speak, please let us know. You can hit us up on our website. I will let you know that Sydney is not hosting the next Data Analytics Wednesday, assuming that we're virtual, which I am assuming that we are, which means that it will be Melbourne's turn, but please do reach out, because we're always keen to have a pipeline of good topics. Now, do we have any interested party in an open mic? So you can, if you have any announcements, any rants, people looking for work, people offering work, and the only stipulation is that you keep it under 2 minutes.
I've got a quick one. I don't know if it's of interest to everybody. It's very tangential. I've got a Google Sheets document that's pulling in the latest COVID data every night, if anybody wants that for playing around in Data Studio or something.
Cool, thanks. For anyone else? Please do stay in touch. If you haven't already joined, it's join.measure.chat. Oh, sorry, Ash.
Yeah, just one quick one. I'm going to put a link in chat. So we're actually running a virtual analytics forum next week. So we're trying to get as many people as we can to kind of just give their opinions on the current environment and how we can, as a group, move forward. It's obviously very anonymous, so you can come in and we'll have some rules around what we can, what we can't share. But if you're interested, just follow the link, and hopefully I'll see you guys next week.
Cool. And Sarah?
Yes, I was going to jump in. I'm, for the Sydney people, I'm the organiser for the Melbourne Web Analytics Wednesday. Not Data Analytics Wednesday, we're still the old school version. I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, which are Data Runs Deep. I think Poplin already has been given a shout out, but I'll give another shout out to them, and Mighty Hive. Thanks to those guys, they keep us running, even though this is a free event. I still want to give a nice shout out to them. And I'll say, if you are from Melbourne and want to give a talk, let me know, because we're doing next month's version, and we'll have a bit of a battle, and we'll see who's better. But thank you. And
No
thank you, Mo,
pressure.
and the rest of the Sydney team for organising this one.
Oh, okay. Oh God, I forgot to update the date. Oh geez, oh failing already. I think Melbourne's
We're
going
doing
to
the
kick our butt.
second Wednesday of May.
Second Wednesday of May. Yeah.
Anyone? Beulah? It will be the 13th. Looks like.
Okay. The 13th of May. We will see you all from Melbourne virtually. A huge thank you to our two speakers. I know it's a very weird time to be presenting, but you both absolutely killed it. It was fantastic. And thank you all for your patience. Please send us any feedback. We'd love to hear from you and learn what we could do better because, yeah, this was our first time. So a big thanks.
I think you did terrific, Mo. Well done.
Thank you.
Clapping virtually.
Oh, look, there's a puppy. Oh, your puppy. Where's your puppy? Where's your puppy?
Very cute dog, Ash.
Ash, I'll let the puppy hear the birds.
Oh. Oh. So, can I have a quick poll? Should I get a rabbit?
Is there a rabbit?
No, that's no rabbit. I kill cactus though. I kill cactus twice. But someone said that it's okay because rabbit will be okay. But I don't know. You're not
Rabbits
supposed to be able
taste
to
good.
kill cactus.
I can kill a cactus.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Twice? I started with
my
pot
daughter
plants.
my
I
daughter killed
started
one.
with
Does that
pot
count?
plants and then I had 2 cactus and then that was it. Someone said it's okay. I'm just overthinking things. Oh, come on. It's a joke, people.
I laughed. I was just on mute.
I mean, I say not about killing cactus. I really did kill 2 cactus and a pot plant. I'm forever sorry about that.
I actually believe you.
I'm a
and I've
bad
killed many a
person.
plant.
I'm a bad person
Oh,
with that.
chicken on the keyboard. Help.
Oh,
Hang on.
oh, it's a chicken.
I've lost Zoom. Yeah, there we go. Now I can see those.
Oh, that's a good-looking chicken. But then I'm
This
Asian,
one's-
so anything that that's not good, really.
Well, I'm not planning
It's
on
a
eating them.
backhanded compliment, really.
Planning on cuddling
It's
them.
a passive-aggressive thing.
Yeah.
It is. It really is. Learn that from the best.
Okay, cool.
All right.
See you later.
All
I'm gonna put
right.
these
See
ones
ya.
to bed, I think.
All right. Have a
Bye.
good Easter. All right,
You
everyone.
too. Bye.
Bye.